Hey, I'm Lauren, certified building biologist, wellness interior designer, and healthy home educator. I want to welcome you to the House Holistics podcast, where we explore how healthy buildings create healthy people. I'll be bringing you life-enhancing conversations with some of the brightest minds in the world. Perhaps your full potential is on the other side of a healthier environment. I'm your host, Lauren Rade. Let's go deeper. So the language we use is very important in our healing journey. And this includes the language we use about ourselves and others. Our nervous system hears it all. Those unconscious beliefs, those thoughts, those emotions. And so how might you, as a listener, be habitually speaking about your situation, maybe an illness that's in your current reality, your symptoms or diagnosis? Languaging is one of the most powerful areas that we get to be mindful of, because anytime we speak, all of our cells are listening and they do respond to those messages. So today I have the pleasure of speaking with Dawn Lester. I want to read Dawn's bio before we jump into our conversation, because it's critically important for you to know that Dawn has been in the thick of it with her healing journey. So she's coming from a place of understanding as we get into this conversation about languaging. So Dawn Lester is a researcher and a writer. She is a co-author of the book, What Really Makes You Ill, that actually came out in 2019, right before the events of 2020. She is also the author of The Nature of Reality that came out in 2010. And her decade-long research and writing project that led to the book, What Really Makes You Ill, involved taking a much deeper look into a whole variety of topics, not just health, and this led to the discovery that so much more of what we're told is wrong. And this in turn enabled Dawn to re-examine some of the more difficult experiences of her own life, including her cancer diagnosis and treatment in the mid-1990s. So through her understanding of the nature of reality, she has been able to gain valuable insights and view those painful past experiences from a different perspective, one that shows us that we are not victims of our past and that the future is not fixed. Instead, our past informs us about life, who we are, and what we can do right now to bring about the future we want. Dawn is inspired by the famous saying, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." She shares her insights and understanding to help people identify, process, and resolve the challenges they face and create the life they wish to experience. With that being said, welcome to the podcast, Dawn. I'm so excited to speak with you today.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Lauren. I'm really happy to be here and looking forward to this conversation. Yeah, it's a very exciting topic, very important. And I know a lot of people know about it. And at the same time, you know, we still catch ourselves out in these little traps of language. So, yeah, it's an important topic. Thank you.
Meeting you at Confluence was quite synchronistic for me. I mean, we shared a lunch just kind of organically. I got to learn a little bit more about your story. Then I went to your workshop that you hosted at Confluence called Transcending the Conditioning. And then I sat next to you at Danny Katz's workshop, and I was like, okay, Dawn and I are just in this field together for some reason. And when I started speaking with you on a deeper level, I just knew your energy and my energy was resonating. I was like, okay, I am very much at home with Dawn right now. And so I'm just so grateful to have met you. And as you know, I'm in the world of environmental health. So I'm helping design and construct buildings that are health enhancing for people, following building biology principles. But what comes along with that is the clientele that is often sick. So in my world, a lot of my clients will have some sort of identity structure of mold toxicity or multiple chemical sensitivity or electrohypersensitivity. And one thing I've noticed, and I've been here, I totally have been here, is how tightly folks cling to these illness labels, and their illnesses have become part of their identity. I mean, we can see this simply on social media with social media handles like Mold Girl or Lyme Dude, or just how people speak to themselves, like my anxiety or my autoimmune or my trauma. So let's just get into the meat of things, Dawn, and I'm going to kind of pull some of your background information as we go. But I'm so curious, when you hear language like this, how do you feel on the inside?
Well, these are important points, and as you say, they are labels, and it's a question of how people attach to them. Now, I'm going to say right off the bat that I am not denying that people experience symptoms. That is not where I'm coming from, and I don't deny that people quite often have, serious ill effects from exposure to certain substances. So there is definitely some form of sensitivity within their body to these substances. And, you know, and I know that, they can be quite serious, the way people feel, and it can really be debilitating. So I'm not denying that. It is the way people express what they're going through, what they express their experience, the language they're using, and certainly when they use personal pronouns of and hold on to it and make it part of them by the my this, and even to say I have, whatever the label is still identifying with it and holding onto it and making it part of themselves, and the body will respond accordingly, which may sound strange to some people who say, well, these are just words. What do you mean the body responds accordingly? Well, we can go into more detail, but there is evidence, it's supported by evidence that we can look at. For example, the placebo effect. It is well known. For me, it's more than what is generally regarded as the placebo effect. That's almost a diminishment of what is actually going on, what is important. So it's more than that, but at least the placebo effect is recognized. It is a known phenomenon. It also has an opposite called the nocebo effect, which is how something the placebo effect is a beneficial effect from something that is inert. The nocebo effect is the opposite, so it's a detrimental effect from something that is seemingly inert. And there are examples of people who've had inert substances on a clinical trial for a chemotherapy, believing that they were taking the chemotherapy drug because that was the clinical trial they were on, and they manifested some of the symptoms that are recognized as being associated with chemotherapy drugs, such as hair loss and vomiting. And then they discovered that they were in fact in the placebo group. So they did not have any, shall we say, they did not have the active chemotherapy drug. So that's just one example, but there's adequate evidence to show that our ideas, our thoughts, our beliefs, our fears manifest in the real world, in our bodies, in our experiences. So the importance of language is because that's how we can recognize what our thoughts, ideas, and our beliefs are. So, if we're having a thought, that will manifest with the words. So we'll know what that thought is because of the words that are being used.
I'm thinking about the listener because they might be saying, how can my words really make me sick? Can you comment on that a little bit more?
Well, it goes back to the basic understanding that our thoughts, ideas, beliefs, fears, and everything are actually creating our experiences, and that goes beyond the materialistic, deterministic view of reality. So that's where, as I said, as you read out within my bio, I say, my understanding of the nature of reality showed me what is what reality is and how we influence it and how we influence our experiences. And I know from my experience, as I said about my cancer diagnosis back in the mid 90s, that I knew my mindset was part of it. I knew how I was feeling emotionally leading up to that. I also knew that it was important for me to stay positive, but this is much more than just simple positive thinking. It was my whole approach to life, and at the same time the actions I took. So sorry, it's excuse me, it's not simply the ideas that we have, it's the actions that we take as well, and our actions are informed by our thoughts and ideas and our fears, so we
Hmm.
are creating our experiences through that. So there is, as I say, plenty of evidence that our experiences manifest according to our thoughts, ideas, fears. And this, I don't know if, are you hearing an echo somewhere?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay, okay, it's just me then. No problem. Um, so it may be strange for some people to hear first off, but there is more than adequate evidence within a whole range of different modalities that we know that we do experience, we do influence our experiences. And so this is important. The importance of that is to know how we take back responsibility for what we are thinking and what we are saying and how we're expressing ourselves, because that will then manifest in our physical experiences.
You had a cancer diagnosis, so you are in
Yes.
the thick of experiencing diagnosis, sickness, illness. So, Dawn, were you mindful and aware of your language around your health then? Or did you come out of the womb just speaking life over death? Or did this experience inform any unlearning that perhaps needed to take place during that time?
It's difficult that there was not a single point that I suddenly thought, it was almost as if there were some intuitive understandings that I hadn't really clarified somewhere. Because at the time, or rather just before the diagnosis, I had a sense that and this is like inverted commas, there was something wrong. And again, I don't use that language as well, because again, saying there's something wrong manifests something wrong. However, I knew there was something happening that wasn't right. And that then manifested with the diagnosis. And at the time, I had also a sense that it was something to do with me, how I felt, my mindset. I'd not looked into anything like spiritual or anything like that at that point. At the same time, it was an intuitive something, but very small. I can't pin it on anything. There was just literally something I felt was important for me to take charge of my life at that point. So it was, I've got to do something about this. Not so it wasn't, I'm a victim and there's nothing I can do. It was, I've got to do something, and it's something to do with how I thought about life. I knew I had to make changes as well. So it was not just the thinking, it was taking action as well. So I started implementing some changes. my approach to life, and as I say, certain actions. And I became more aware of the kind of products I was using. So I started looking at labels more, being more careful of the types of products, of looking at things that were more natural, thinking about foods that were more natural. So it wasn't that I'd not been aware before somehow, but I stepped it up at that point. I also went through the standard treatment. So I had chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery at the time as well. So that was also a mindset to sort of, I wasn't going to let whatever was going on beat me, if you like. So I knew it was important for me to do something about this. I wasn't going to succumb, and at the same time, there were people around me who were more ill. So that could be that, that was quite difficult. And to some extent, I had to remove myself from some of these, from connecting with some of these people, and also with what's called, like a support group I was in, because then you keep going over the same thing. And I thought, no, I need to come out of that and get on with life somehow, if you like.
So it sounds like it was a mix of you piling your life experiences on top of one another, but then having this moment of really an awareness. Maybe some people might say it's this a moment of enlightenment, of realizing, yeah, I'm not going to let this thing beat me. And you really took ownership into your own hands. That's huge. It's huge because when we don't take ownership of our life's experience, we essentially dole out somebody else taking responsibility for it. And I've been thinking a lot about this, Dawn, about self-responsibility and then victim consciousness. And I had this moment too when I had to unsubscribe from 10 plus Facebook groups and various support groups for chronic illness, chronic pain, autoimmune this, autoimmune that, that I was just subscribed to and getting notifications on the daily, believing that it was helping me, but I was actually just in a trauma loop. Boing, 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 not able to get off the hamster wheel because I was constantly training my brain to perceive more threats. So I hear you on that. Like you had to pull away from certain subsets of maybe individuals or groups so that you could start healing. Is that right?
Yes. Was not straight away. It was a process, like you sort of in that, and there's a sense of camaraderie when you're not the only person, and because when you're just on your own dealing with something that can obviously be harder. So it's good to have people around you who are helping and supporting, and yet
Right.
I still knew I had to do it for myself, sort it out for myself. But as I say, it wasn't an immediate thing. Like like you, it's a process of steps along the way where you find like insights come through that say maybe this isn't such a good idea, because it's like you say, it's taking you around the hamster wheel, and that you just constantly in that loop, and those kinds of ideas can keep you in a fear state, which also is like a victim state as well. Not that I'm saying anyone within those groups are kind of claiming being a victim. At the same time, identifying with it and taking that label on is not necessarily helpful for healing, because it stays in the idea that there's something wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and there are certain ideas, and some people are not so comfortable with trying to get out of those things on their own because there are other people going through something, and it feels like I'm not the only one. There's a relief. There's a sense of, oh, it's not just me. So I understand that there's that support aspect.
Mhm.
And at the same time, it does require self-ownership to say, okay, what can I do? I have to do this on my own to a certain extent. And it might make it might require us to make, significant sort of changes. And we're all on our own journey, and this is the point that not everyone's in the same place, on the same journey, have the same ideas and beliefs and fears. Some people are more fearful, and so they're less likely to want to actually come out of that. And those situations are for us to decide, well, do we stay there with them? So that, like the people pleasing, oh, well, stay there and help them. Or do we step out and we look after ourselves, the self ownership, to look to our own health and take our own steps, make our, carry on on our own journey.
Yeah, and something that I never really realized until I had support from a group that is this brain retraining limbic system heart coherent group that brought this to my attention is too, when we think about when we're talking about our label or our diagnosis or our sensitivities, where yes, one, we are reinforcing our identity around this structure of being sick and staying sick, but also we aren't necessarily thinking about other people that are trying to heal. uh there are some people that might be triggered by those words or language around sickness or illness, especially if they are trying to heal. And so these just I found were unhelpful speech habits in general. When yes, like I might be sick and not well, and I might have this egoic structure of wanting to convince other people that I'm sicker than they are. And I've noticed that a lot of times when we are stuck in illness, it might be interesting to reflect on the language that we are using, because there are parts of the egoic structure that we subconsciously might not realize are wanting to keep us sick because we are receiving maybe support or help. There are parts of us. There were certainly parts of me that identified with some of these labels, and maybe at first I had some resistance around changing them. But that is some deep inner shadow work.
Yes, I mean that's one of the difficult things to recognize, that it is in fact a gift to see what's going on and to be able to look at these things from a particular or a different perspective, and to keep going through that. And I mean, there are so many parts to all of this because each of us is on our own journey, that other people will be experiencing something somewhat differently. At the same time, we have that support and that comfort of other people at the beginning. And I know there are various sort of, this is made fun of, like older people, sit around and talk about, all their surgeries and their scars and, all their illnesses and all the tablets they're taking. It was like, I mean, that's never appealed to me at all.
Yeah.
However, there is that comfort to a certain extent, and there are all kinds of reasons, and certainly within the shadow aspect of some people is not being heard, not having attention paid to them, always looking after other people. So to then have something that turns the attention back on them, for some people it's really supportive and comforting, so they're getting the attention, so they don't necessarily want to come out of that. As you say, the sort of the egoic aspect says, oh, this is nice, I've not had attention before. And so there's a reluctance to say, okay, well, how do I want to stay here, and what can I do about changing this, or what am I learning from this particular experience, and what can I do? So yeah, I think sometimes I'm not happy with using the word change, because change and change implies there's something wrong that needs to be fixed, and I don't mean it in that way, that there's something that needs to be fixed, merely that we're going through a process of learning, of evolution, of change. And so it's a development, so that the change is a new way of looking at something, a development, an expansion of understanding, not a change because there's something wrong, if that makes sense. Again, this is the language. So in fact, in that quote, which is attributed to Mahatma Gandhi, only he never said those exact words, I looked into that once, and discovered that that is a very brief overview of a much longer quote, which is still very powerful. But it's I feel that it's, thinking that there's something that's got to change still, maybe, and again, this is where the language comes in, maybe holds us to the idea that as I say, there's something wrong that needs to change, whereas it's more that we are expanding in our understanding. So we are changing in that respect, and our understanding is expanding. We are learning, we are growing. And that's, for me, what this life is about learning, developing, understanding, and putting our learning and understanding into effect, and sharing with others what we learn and how we've learned, and learning from others and sharing what we've learned, and then working together. So it's not about staying in isolation, and yet some of our understanding requires us to do that inner work, which is totally on our own, and then take it forward as we learn our way forward, if you like.
I am very picky about my words too, especially around the word healing. So I like to use the word transforming, because healing, it does imply this destination that once I get out of pain and I'm healed, everything will be better, or I can get to my life prior to diagnosis, illness, etc. I've learned that the word transforming means that it's almost like there's not this destination we're going after, but more so a evolution, and kind of like a spiraling of learning and growing. Um, and I think language is so important here, especially in our journey of healing. And so we know when there are painful experiences, we often seek validation outside of ourselves. And this can be a form of security and control and protection. And the theme that I'm just picking up in your work, Dawn, is okay, this happened to me and it was painful. I've heard you say that you are an optimist and a realist. This happened and it was challenging. And yet, here's where I'm taking ownership over my life to continue this transformation. And I think the work that you have done is just beautiful. And you are exactly where you're supposed to be on this timeline, because we are just coming up into a precipice of people becoming or experiencing some sort of illness. And we're going to need people like you to guide us. I see you so much as this coach towards another paradigm of belief, of thinking, of language. So my question for you is, do you think that our culture in general has romanticized victim consciousness versus taking self-responsibility?
Wow, that's a huge question. Just before I go to that, if I can make one point, and because you were talking about people that then, we talk about being healed as a fixed end, whereas if we are using healing, it's an ongoing process, so it's an active process. And I know that's something that Danny Katz talks about in her work as well, making words into their active using words in their active state. So heal. I am healing, or I am taking responsibility for the process. I'm transforming through, or I am transitioning through this particular process. So it's keeping that in that present tense ing form. So it's an active form. And I'm just saying that's a really important point that you made, rather than saying, "Oh, I have healed," because there's so many nuances to that. So going to your question, which is huge, I'm not sure where we are culturally. I think really from what I've been looking into the research, certainly in the last few years, with the psychological, emotional, physical, spirit, not spirit, physical, the mental, spiritual aspects, is we have been conditioned to think a certain way, and the majority of people are still, well, maybe not the majority. Okay, I'm not going to put that out there. A lot of people are still in that sense of believing the conditioning, which is why I chose to create that workshop at Confluence, not Music and Science, Confluence, of transcending the conditioning. Because even those of us who are, working through that, we can still find that we are caught in certain types of conditioning, and that can be identified through the language that we're using. So, we're all helping each other through this, and some of us are in a certain stage of being able to help others and bridge. So, like with your work, you're reaching out to people who maybe still feel stuck in where they are in terms of their understanding of the environment, and helping them understand a broader, or gain a broader understanding of what's going on to help them come out of that, and at the same time create healthy environments, because by creating healthy physical environments, you're putting energy into something that is healthier, if you like. So there is that positive action, positive thinking. The two are going together. It's not just positive thinking, oh, everything's going to be all right. You just say, okay, we're going to do something that's different. We're going to create something, and we know it's healthier, that they're good materials, and it's an active process, and it is a creative process. So it's moving things forward. So there are many people who are coming out of that conditioning, coming out of that victim consciousness. But that mindset is baked into the education systems that we've all been indoctrinated into, certainly in the West particularly. So it's we have to bow to authority. So, we have to listen to the teachers, and then just regurgitate what they tell us back in the exams to get the pass, to get the whatever it is, the qualifications that apparently we need to be able to get a job so that we can get on their hamster wheel and, produce for them. So it is a mindset of, you've got to get good examination results or whatever at school. You've got to get good grades, good qualifications, so you can get a good job and then be out there in the workplace. And that's, again, part of the part of the problem. I'll say maybe not problem, but the mindset that we think that leads to freedom, only it doesn't. It's trapping people into that idea, because they're victims of this, of that mindset that is what life is about. And so coming out of that, a lot of people think, well, what is there? And it can be a little bit unsettling. At the same time, it's very empowering. But part of the scary part is taking responsibility for ourselves. And because we haven't been given that information from an early enough stage, it can be unsettling. We say, well, what do we do? How do we go about this? How do we go about doing something different? Because we haven't got that training. So that's where, again, one of the things really important is, critical thinking, to think, to ask questions. And that's something else that we've been encouraged not to do, or rather discouraged from doing, asking questions. You don't ask, well, yes, I'm asking questions. It's not rude to ask a question.
Yeah.
I mean, do you know what I mean? It's like, and yet within the sort of education system, it's discouraged because there's so much to get through. So, you aren't allowed to question the material. And certainly within, like medical science, those sorts of ideas. And that's become quite obvious over the last few years, that there have been so few people questioning the mainstream medical system. Only now a lot more people are doing that. So we're looking at something and say, okay, well, we're now questioning that. So we are looking at different ways of understanding health, what causes the symptoms that we call disease, although they're not diseases. So again, it's just back to the label. It's dismantling this whole idea of these labels, what they mean, what health actually is. It's turning it back on its head and saying, well, what is the body doing? Why is it manifesting these symptoms? And there's plenty of information out there that helps us understand what the symptoms are, what they're doing, and it's not just the physical aspect. And as you say, within your work, you're dealing with a lot of the actual physical materials, and at the same time putting an encouraging word, set of words. Your languaging is encouraging to make it a creative, something that's creative, as opposed to we've got to do this because of it's fearful otherwise. If you're doing something to get out of fear, you're still reinforcing that fear. So again, that's the importance of understanding why we're doing something, and to come from the right mindset so that it's creative as opposed to reactive. If that answers your question. But again, it's a huge topic to cover as to, within what's going on culturally, because I'm not sure there's a single thread there.
I think you are right. It is this unconscious programming, so much of it, of folks not actually recognizing that there is this critical thinking component without having someone in a white lab coat tell us what's wrong. I mean, your book is so great because you cover the physicality side of this. You talk about environmental pollution. You talk about sensitivities from Wi-Fi and 5G. You cover toxicity when it comes to different materials and health. So you already have that full understanding, and also you are bringing to this world that environmental health, I believe, needs, is this understanding that it's so much more than that. Because, and I'll speak from personal experience, I have had compounding events happen in my life that was this diagnosis and this thing and that thing, right? Without going into details. But there was a catalytic event that occurred where I became overwhelmingly sensitive to my job sites, to, the designs I was creating. But that wasn't the root cause. My toxic bucket was so full that whatever exposure I encountered, it was just overflowing with symptoms and sensitivities. But I know that that is not the sole cause, because I had a lot of unconscious beliefs. I had a lot of emotional trauma that I hadn't dealt with yet. And so part of this is really interesting because I feel very much called to not focus on, modern construction is killing us all, because there's plenty of Instagram handles that you can find that depressing content. But I feel very much called to, and I know you share this calling, Dawn, is putting our energy towards creating a new world, a new paradigm of life, of joy, of healing and transformation. And so I just think it's interesting that there is this paradigm of maybe like sleep. I don't even know. It's just the word sleepy, like sleepy people. I used to be asleep, I used to not fully know, and I'm still waking up to so many new things. But there are so many people that are coming to recognize, oh my gosh, yeah, like I do need to take ownership for my life. I'm thinking about one design client that I have, Dawn. Um, she she has dealt with mold toxicity and also EHS, so sensitivity as far as modern electronics and EMF. But think about it. She already know, like my clients in so many ways are already down the rabbit hole with with a lot of this stuff, knowing that there are other factors that aren't being explained in the conventional building world. So it is interesting, like the kind of nuance here as well. But my heart is so passionate about helping clients and helping people realize, okay, you might have these sensitivities, but we are not these sensitivities. Like that is not part of our identity or part of our labels that we need to speak into our life for eternity. You have any comments about that?
Yes, I mean, as you say, the idea that people say, they have something, because again, that's owning it. If you say you have something, you're owning it. And I know within What Really Makes You Ill that there's a section which, I mean, maybe if like now I'd suggest a different title for that section, but it's called Poisoning the Planet. And it's quite I mean, it's almost book size in itself. It's I don't know, it's over 100, well over 100 pages, that section. The point of pointing out those aspects of poisoning, because it covers a wide range, mainly chemical, but the different ways. So, within the food supply, within agriculture, within the sort of medical system, all of that. It's not to scare people. It's like, oh, it's all scary. It's like there's so much it's scary. It's actually to say, look, there's so much, and we can do something about it only when we know what's going on. You can't make an informed decision if you don't have the information. So in terms of, just food, people looking at food that hasn't been sprayed with chemicals, pesticides, insecticides, fertilizer, goodness knows what else. So, choosing food that hasn't been poisoned by the chemicals. It's not to say and again, it's not from the place of fear. It's like, oh, well, if I eat that food, it's going to make me ill. It's more that I'm respecting my body, my vehicle, to nourish it with good quality food. So it's, do you see what I mean? It's a change of perspective. So it's not like, oh, I mustn't eat this because it's bad for me, it'll poison me. Oh, I mustn't go near that. It's not from that place of fear. It's from I'm caring for myself, so I will make choices that support my body. And so it's the mindset, the actions then trigger, not trigger, but they then lead to, you know, changes of mindset, and then the mindset leads to other changes in action. So it's a, it's an ongoing process of making changes. So it's not like, oh, we've got to suddenly change everything overnight. It's not, because that would be overwhelming. It's a process, and say, okay, to look and say, okay, well, now I have this information. What can I do about it? And so
Mm.
taking ownership is a massive first step for people, because then they're choosing to break that victim consciousness. Oh, well, there's nothing I can do. It's all around me. Everything's poisoned. It's, you know, there's nothing we can do with stuff. It's not. So it's to say, okay, there is a lot. However, there is also a lot that I can do.
Yes.
I can make positive changes, because the whatever is going on in the environment hasn't killed us. We're still around. So, okay, well, that means that and so this is the other point, that means that we can do something about it. We can minimize our exposures. It is also to recognize that our bodies are amazing. And that's
Amazing.
another big belief to overturn, because the whole medical system is based on the idea that we know nothing about our bodies, that only they do, and that only they have the answers, and our bodies are just stupid. And
Machines.
again, sorry, the machines, yes, yes.
Yeah, machines for
And
living in.
yes, and the whole concept of autoimmune diseases is based on the idea that the body attacks itself, and that is nonsense. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't things going on within the body. That's something very different. But the idea that the body is attacking itself and causing itself harm is ludicrous, because that is not how the body actually works. The body responds and reacts to physical substances and to our thoughts, ideas, emotions, and our state. So that's one of the most powerful first steps, is our bodies are amazing. They really are. And that means that they are capable, as long as they're not overwhelmed. And that goes back to, and I'm sort of leading, to what you were talking about with the bucket, that if we don't overload it, then it can manage a certain level of things that are out there that may be not brilliant. And again, that's also our mindset, to think, well, okay, my body can cope with a certain level of exposures, as long as it's not overwhelmed. But when when it's overwhelmed, and as you say, then the last few exposures then turn it into something that's then triggers all kinds of sensitivities. Then there's a, as you say, there's a bucket load, and that is an opportunity. And I know it might not be seen as an opportunity, but with these situations, it is an opportunity to say, okay, there's too much, so I've become oversensitive. So what is it that I can do about this? What can I do about this overloaded bucket? And to have a look at it, and it might start with the physical changes, and then start working inwards into the, as you were saying, the inner work and the shadow work, to see what the opportunity, what the gift is for learning about ourselves. And it may be to bring us back to recognizing that our bodies are brilliant, about taking responsibility. I don't know, because we're all different, then people will find that message for themselves. But again, that's what in many cases, the body, the symptoms are the body sending messages, and it's for us to learn to listen. Because again, this is a new skill for us. It's like learning to listen to our bodies and understanding the message, recognizing the message, interpreting it, and then doing something about it.
Dawn, I
It's
feel like we just approached like holy ground. Like my shoes are already off and I'm sitting on my floor, but I feel like this is one of those moments in a conversation where it is holy ground. And here's why. You just nailed something so brilliantly, because our bodies are perfectly and brilliantly designed to heal themselves. We are made to regenerate. And so that theory that our bodies are broken, unable, not good enough, etc., isn't going to put us on a path of transformation or healing. because we have observed plenty of people living in a moldy environment and still thriving. I have observed plenty of people living next to high tension power lines and doing just fine. I have observed plenty of people wearing plastic clothing and eating crappy food, and they're okay. So this is the point of the conversation that is so important, because it shows that our beliefs, our thoughts are triggering something else going on.
Yes, I mean, in terms of ideas of what causes people to be ill, that there's the standard thing, smoking, for example. Well, I mean, we've used the word cancer before, so I'm just being cautious in case I need to be careful about words. So, smoking is bad for your health. And at the same time, there are examples of people who live into their 90s, whatever, who smoke and are fine. So for me, that says exceptions to these rules. The rule is, smoking does X, Y, Z. And there are exceptions. So if you say, well, there are exceptions, that means the rule is not a rule. That means it is part of something, maybe, because there are people for whom, smoking is associated with ill health. Doesn't mean it causes it, for example. At the same time, it doesn't mean it's a good thing. So and again, nothing I'm saying should be construed as medical advice. I'm not. This is information I'm sharing. And again, because we have these anomalies and contradictions, and that's one of the things I found when I was doing my research for the book. There were so many anomalies and contradictions, thinking, well, it can't be both. So there's something else going on. And because, again, what really makes you ill covers pretty much the physical side, as you said. And I've been looking so much more deeply in the past, say, 3 years at the non-physical side, which is just as deep, if you like, if not more so. So that at the time with that, still saying that it was not just one factor. And again, it's these definitive statements of this causes that is unproven. And it's not proven in the real world. It's not even proven within the scientific world. Like the reasons that people get ill, once you start looking, and certainly for chronic conditions, autoimmune conditions, whatever, a lot of the labels, once I started looking, I found that the mainstream says, we don't exactly know the mechanism. We're not entirely sure what causes. The causes are not fully understood. The mechanism is not totally known yet. We're still working on it. And so I thought, this is not a system that then says, oh, well, we don't really know, but take this because this will fix you. Well, that's a big contradiction. So the medical system will not thrive from us knowing that our bodies heal themselves. And that is the big thing. That is the underlying point. It's huge, as you said. It is so core that our bodies heal themselves. Our job, if you like, is to learn what the symptoms are, what the message is, so that we can do something about it. And then it's not to make the symptoms go away because they're bad, but it's to resolve the issue so that the symptoms do go away because we've heard the message.
Symptoms are messengers.
Yes. And the body does regenerate itself. There's more than adequate evidence that, the body's constantly regenerating, and whatever levels you want to go, if you want to go like at the cellular level, that cells are dying all the time, and dying and renewing all the time. So the body's renewing itself all the time. And do you want to give your new cells the message that they're healthy and vibrant and life is good? In which case, they'll be lively, energetic cells. or do want to give the message that, life's tough and it's hard and everything's out to get me and it's fearful. Because, I mean, even just saying that, you sort of, is there's that's shrinking. And so your cells are going to be not renewing in that way. So it's, and that's where I also am reluctant to talk about things that are, you know, we're told that they can't be healed or they can't be fixed, and that itself is the bone pointing, it's or even within one of the articles I've read about the nocebo effect, the medical hexing, it's this condition is incurable. There's nothing we can do. Well, that's not true, because plenty of people have said no, thank you, and gone and found their own path and carried on living healthily for years afterwards. And not that I ever received that message, so I never had to overcome that. However, I've that there is information out there of how bad these treatments are, and so I'm helping to say not necessarily, and there's a lot more to it than just the positive thinking that the treatments aren't bad, when we know they are harmful, and at the same time our bodies can transform and overcome that damage, because there are compensatory mechanisms that come into play if something is functioning less than optimally. And that's not necessarily a good thing if we want our bodies to be functioning well. So they say, oh, well, it's okay if I do this thing and it harms me a little bit, because other systems will come in and start functioning and overcome that, because you're still weakening the system. So, and again, there's so much nuance to all of this.
Yes.
And that's why there's no straightforward answer to, well, the medical system says this. Well, it's not that, but it is this one thing instead. And it just doesn't work that way, because there are so many parts to it. And because it also includes our mindset, our thoughts, that's non-physical, and the medical system just does not take that doesn't really take that into consideration to the significant extent that it should be taken into consideration.
It's coming down to a belief system of believing what we've always been told, or believing in our innate ability to heal, regenerate, recover. And so even this whole conversation about languaging and identities, it's all going to boil down to that core program or that core belief. So how might someone, Dawn, go about starting to shift their language over themselves? Can you offer some low-hanging fruit for someone interested in assessing how they speak to re-language per se, or I like to say, to stop shoulding over themselves?
Yes, well, that's one word, isn't it? Well, I should do this. Um, I mean, the obvious ones are well, I can't. Okay, well, is that I think actually, and slightly borrowing from Peter Crone, who is called the Mind Architect, who's amazing. I don't know if you've come across him before. Yes, um, he well, and also Byron Katie, because they both come from the questioning aspect, or of asking the question, is that true? So, in terms of our beliefs, we can access our beliefs or understand it or know our beliefs because of the words that come out. So you say, okay, well, the I don't know, whatever the belief is, and we can see the words that are attached to it, and to ask ourselves the question, to say, so it's not sitting there examining every single belief, but it's to come across some, maybe sort of sit with certain things, and allow some ideas to present themselves. And look at the language that 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 is used for that particular belief, and possibly kind of question how we formed that belief. So a lot of beliefs are very fundamental in, well, I don't feel worthy, or, I'm not loved, or that's, fairly basic kind of beliefs. And to say, well, is that true? And or why do I believe that? Where did that come from? To sit with that and think, just to like self-inquiry, really looking at those ideas, those thoughts that we're having. And it's, it's not to be hard, again, not to be hard on ourselves, to sit there and think, oh, that's interesting. Where did that come from? From a curious perspective, rather than a self-analysis. I need to work this one out. It's just okay, curious. And if an idea comes, fine, you might be able to get to where that came from. And if it doesn't, that's also fine. Don't force it. But it's to understand our languages. So if something's happening in, a particular experience, and say, well, why did that happen? Oh, that always happens to me. Ah, that always happens to me. Right. Always.
Ding, ding, ding.
Exactly. So it's that kind of thing to say those kinds of opportunities, or those are the kinds of opportunities to see, just something like that. That's like, oh, that always happens. Oh, that never happens to me. Or why don't I? Why isn't what I think those kinds of ideas, those kinds of thoughts, when they arise, again, different just trying to think of it's difficult, so being put on the spot of the kinds of things, because we're all different. It's to be able to, during the course of the day, if something and again, triggers are probably a good point. So something that triggers you is an opportunity to say, right, okay, that I've got annoyed with something. So what is the thought that comes from that annoyance, from that trigger? And what can I learn about myself through that trigger, through those words that I've just used?
I think the biggest one is I can't. Especially if there's a belief that somebody has allegiance to that they can't heal. I mean, our cells hear it all. And even as I say that, speaking vulnerably, that was a belief that I had at one point. So wouldn't it make sense that my higher self and God, or maybe someone refers to source or creator, but wouldn't it make sense that there may be one physical injury after another, or one opportunity to heal after another, until I got the point, until I woke up to, oh my gosh, I believe I can't heal. Wow. And it was rooted in, other areas of my life. But that is a belief that I think a lot of people are unconsciously walking around with, that they don't have to.
Yes, and also, again, a good point that you brought up about things that have happened in the past. And so, because it hasn't happened in the past, or it has happened in the past, we hang on to it as if it's going to always happen the same way. So, well, I didn't heal, or it took me a long time, or it came back, whatever. I didn't get better, or or I've not been well since. These are the kinds of ideas of something that's happened in the past that we can't necessarily, again, the belief that we can't necessarily do anything about it. When we look at who and what we truly are, there is only truly, if you like, now. And now is where the power is. And to say, now we put the energy into okay, as you say, that's the wow, that's how I have thought. And I can, again, using the word change, I can change that now. I no longer have to hold on to that. And that change to the I can do something about this informs our body now. Our body doesn't necessarily say, yeah, but you didn't believe that yesterday, so I'm holding on to that belief from yesterday. No, it's where we are now. It's the energy that we put into our thoughts, beliefs, and ideas now. Um, Now, I know we can get into the positive thinking because there's a lot of people that say, oh, it's just positive thinking. Yeah. Well, yes, and it's a lot more than that because just positive thinking, and I know there's nothing wrong, and again, there's nothing wrong with affirmations, there's nothing wrong with putting out the right words. It's when you're doing that and your body is sending you a message that says, you don't believe that, then you know there's a mismatch, and that message isn't going to go into your body. So it is that knowing somatically as well as the new belief, the new ideas. Now, it's not to say, oh, well, because my body doesn't believe it, I just give up. No, it's understanding where the response from your body, and you'll know what that feels like. You know, that sense of, oh, you know, just something says, I don't believe that. And that's when that's also another opportunity to have a look at, well, okay, where's the resistance to saying this, you know, my body heals, you know, something saying you don't believe that. So let's have a look, you know, be curious and say, okay, well, I can feel that. There's a resistance there. I wonder where that comes from. Not, oh, why am I, you know, not beating yourself up, but it's the curiosity of, oh, okay. It's the recognition and the curiosity and working with that and recognizing where you are at this moment and knowing that it's part of a transformational process. As you say, that is an excellent word because it's transforming something that may be stuck somewhere within your system that's holding on to something that may have been useful in the past, for example. And you say, well, is it useful now? Is it serving me now? It's serving me because it's teaching me. Okay. However, is it serving me to hold on to this idea that this is what is wrong with me, for example? You know, this label.
When I did Byron Katie's work of inquiry, I learned the root cause of that belief that I once had of I will never be healed. As I took that journey down the rabbit hole with that, I received these memories of when I would be in a cast when I broke my wrist or when I broke my leg and I was on crutches. I remembered several instances where people spoke over me and said, "Oh, you always get hurt, Lauren." Or, "Lauren, we need to put you in a bubble because you keep getting injured." And I didn't realize at the time, but I was internalizing that message and also coming into alignment with it, believing that, oh, yeah, they're right. I always get hurt. Yeah, huh. I didn't think about that. I do always get hurt. I it was just unconscious. And so in my latter years, I was able to say, no, I renounce that. One, that is not true over my life. And wow, too, how careful we need to be with our words. We speak over people that are in their transformational journey, whether it's a physical injury, a sickness, a diagnosis, cancer, whatever it may be. Like, this is also a wake-up call to how we are speaking, not just over ourselves, but what sort of curses are we speaking over other people?
Yes, absolutely. There are people who are stuck in a particular mindset of these labels, and they can put all kinds of as you say, curses on other people. And that's, what happens with the white coats and the consultants when they put out a prognosis over people, and many people obey that to the letter. Sorry, you've only got 3 months, and that's it, 3 months. They obey the instructions, and then the consultants and these people think that they're right. Well, they're right because they put it out there. The there again, because there are always nuances. One of the nuances with that is to be respectful of where other people are on their own journey. So not to, again, it's not for me to say not to. I would suggest people be careful to not diminish when other people are going through pain, and not to deny their pain and what they're actually experiencing, and at the same time to offer encouragement to help them transform through it. So it's like I said, I know, people experience all kinds of horrible symptoms. I'm not denying that. It's the labels, the causes, the standard explanation for those. That's what I'm rejecting. So let's put all that aside, look at what's actually happening, and help people understand what they are going through, what they are learning. And again, it's, somebody's really in suffering, not to say, oh, there's a gift in there. Well, yes, there is, but again, to choose how we approach other people to help them through it, you know, offering compassion to what they're going through, and at the same time hear if they are open to transitioning out of it.
Hmm?
And
Here,
it
if
so
they
it
are open.
yes, we are, it's a skill that a lot of people, the majority of people, seem to have lost, truly listening to what somebody's saying. And I think, the tech stuff is partly responsible, and I don't know. So there's something within culture, one of these cultural changes where things, for some reason, people aren't listening. So that's something to get back to really hear what somebody's saying. And because everyone's different, just because two people have the same label, the same diagnosis, it doesn't mean to say they're going through the same thing. You know, so again, each person is an individual. So we, speak to the person, and that's why usually, when I speak to people, I speak one on one, because then I can hear what that person is actually saying. Really listen to what they're saying, and to hear. So again, this is where the language comes in, to hear the kind of words that they're saying, depending on their circumstances, and draw out what they're thinking. For example, if they say, well, this always happens to me, like you said, that always, okay, let's explore that. What do you mean by always? And what was going on in your life when these events occurred? Because quite often there's something happening, and there is a purpose to these experiences. So yeah, there isn't with all of this, I find it may be dissatisfactory, unsatisfactory. People may be dissatisfied with, like, well, I want an answer. Well, because we've been trained to believe we need certainty, and you just go, okay, no, there is no certainty, because we are all different, and each person is experiencing something slightly different. And so, and at the same time, we're still learning, because so much of what we've been told isn't true, and so we don't know it all yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be a vulnerable experience for someone to come to terms with their languaging and the labels that they have spoken over themselves. I speaking from personal experience. um and and when I had the spine and low back injury that I had in 2021 to this point, Dawn, I remember not wanting to share my experience with hardly anyone. I kept it very private. It was an extremely painful experience, but I knew that I was evolving myself. And so, because of my past experiences, I did not want to share because I didn't want other people's opinions, energy, or even their prayers. Because what if their prayers were not actually for my highest and best good, right? People have prayed for me in the past to just get well or to get out of pain. But actually, we both know that sometimes the only way out is through. And so I just knew in my gut that I was supposed to minimize talking to my friends and family about the details of what I was going through, the illness and the diagnosis, because I know it sounds harsh, but it's well established in especially the neuro retraining community that that kind of talking about, oh, this is what's going on with me, or oh, I'm in so much pain, it's well established that that's not helpful in the long run. And so I rarely told other people what was going on with me because I did not want to perpetrate an identity and unconsciously create associations between my symptoms and my well-being. And so even today, people are like, I had no idea you were going through all of that. And I was like, that was on purpose because I was guarding my transformation. And I also was aware of the unconscious labels that others might put on me.
And that's incredibly brave to do that. And at the same time that you recognized what you were going through and to step back and go through what you were going through on your own, take yourself through it and not be taken off your course, off your journey by something that somebody else said. Because then, I know when you're going through pain and difficulties, yeah, that there is a lot of vulnerability there. And so it can be easy to ask people to help you. Now, again, that there's always this balance of being open to receiving help and also recognizing what you're going through, and the fact that you recognized it was for you to take yourself through that journey. And was that something that helped you out of your, oh, this always happens to me belief system? Right,
Absolutely.
okay.
Because I didn't totally neutralize the talk, but I minimized
Okay.
the self-talk. And it was difficult at first. And some people might say, oh, well, like that sounds like gaslighting or pretending to be fine when you're not. But I knew the power of my body and I already knew I was a healing, I had healing mechanisms inside of me. I already knew that. It was simply to rewire my brain's habit of perceiving threats and expecting to be ill once again or day after day. So it was really a choice to choose a higher perspective over what you keep saying in this conversation, Dawn, over fear. And so I'm curious for you as well. Like, in your own experience of healing through your cancer diagnosis, did anything like that ever come up to you as well, where you were maybe more careful about sharing some experiences with people that maybe weren't totally going to resonate?
Oh, it's all been it's all been a process, really. I want to go back to your point on gaslighting, which is important because that's where if you're fooling yourself, then somewhere along the line you're going to have that come back to you.
Right.
but it didn't sound like you were doing that at all, because you were conscious of your choices, of minimizing it. Um, I At the time, I don't think I said much to people, um, to many people. I've tended not to be one to talk out my problems, which possibly was part of the problem that led to, the build up of whatever it was. I knew at some point I knew I needed to make changes in my life. So not being one who kind of shared with other people, I tended to be one who listened. Not a people pleaser as such, but a shoulder for other people. But I also knew I needed to make changes in my life, and I did make a pretty major change when I realized I had to get out of my marriage. Now, that did lead me into looking at more, should we say, some of the more spiritual works, and getting into the nature of reality and understanding. So that gave me a decent grounding as to what I was doing, or what I had done, or what I had created for myself, and the opportunity, and why it was appropriate to release myself from that marriage, because it was not taking me in a, or it was time for a new direction for me, shall we say. There was a definite something inside of me saying, there's something for me to do. So I had to change my circumstances in order to then take the next steps along my journey. Um, Generally, still not really talking. I don't know. I suppose I didn't talk, and it's only been recent that I've started recently. In fact, was it a year or was it 2 years ago that I first started talking about my own cancer journey, whereas before I didn't talk about it. I was like, well, it's in the past. I'm okay. And part of that, I think, there's something called survivor guilt, or that because we keep hearing in the news so many people, that there's a very, very low survival rate, and so it's like, I didn't want. So again, it's this shrinking part of I'm still here, and yet I'm in a very small minority, and almost everyone knows somebody who's died from it, and so it was not saying, oh, look at me, I didn't want it to sound like, oh, look at me, I'm okay. So I wasn't talking about it, even though the book had come out and I was starting to talk to people. And there came a point where I felt that's the wrong perspective, because there is something for me to share which will be helpful for people. It's not that it's, oh, it's not my journey, but it's part of my journey to say, okay, I'm sharing what I went through, because it helps people find something useful, or I can help people find something useful to come out of it, because I knew it was something to do with my mindset, my beliefs, the way my approach to life. I wanted more. I was stuck in a place, and I wanted not more in terms of material things, but that was, the sort of lack of fulfillment. That's what a lot of people, just doing the ordinary life, somehow there was not enough meaning in there somewhere. And that's not to say that, again, it sounds like I say, oh, well, leading a normal life has no meaning. Yes, it does. It wasn't for me. It wasn't part of my journey to stay there. That's all I can say. It's not about judgment, and for anyone else, this is obviously, it was something to do with my journey. And then again, like I say, a couple of years ago, I realized that it was appropriate for me to share what I'd gone through, to say, no, having the treatment is not a death sentence, because that's what a lot of people were saying. And it's like, no, not necessarily. And I have since found plenty of evidence that there are many people, in fact, way more. I'm sure that the percentage of people who um, continue to thrive beyond a diagnosis, whether they have treatment or not, is I mean, some do, some don't. I think there are a lot more of us, but I don't think the mainstream generally wants that information known, because it shows that you know uh, they don't understand how the body works. But it is time for everyone to know how the body works. It is time to share this, to say, okay, this is the physical part and also the emotional,
Yeah.
psychological trauma part. You know, there's that part as well. That's the two are very much interconnected. So, as I say, it just felt appropriate to share with other people, and uh, which is why I've started doing that. So it again, it was only recent. So for whatever reason, it just didn't. Well, as I said, it didn't feel appropriate to share, because it wasn't. Part of me was also saying, well, that isn't who I am now, so I didn't want to identify with it. So I was torn between that. And I thought, well, if I talk about it, then I'm identifying. And I thought, no, I can say it in a way that is not identifying. So again, choosing the language of, as I say, I received a diagnosis. And I may change that language as well, because it's not that I don't use the word I had. You know, it's like, uh, so yeah, just again, the languaging is what you own, how you talk to yourself, how you talk to your own body, the subconscious. And it's, again, not suppressing how you feel. It's very much the opposite of allowing how you feel to make itself know.
Right.
And
Right.
that can happen through symptoms.
Well, I'm so glad you listened to that inner wisdom of timing, of paying attention to, you know what, this is the season that I feel called to share about this part, the significant, I would say, part of your story, because there is this piece of relatability now with others. I'm sure you are experiencing. Um, and when I hear your story, Dawn, I feel, wow, people need to know this part about you, because that means hope. That means there's another way. And I just get goosebumps thinking about it because it's significant. And so I'm so glad that that part is now in your bio, and it is something that you're talking about. You know, as you were saying about the emotions, one of my mantras today is kind of like, you know what, if I'm caught up in anxiety, or I'm caught up in something, it's like, let's just drop the narrative. Let's drop the mind story. Let's drop whatever is happening, and let's feel the emotion. We don't have to drop the emotion. We don't have to drop the feeling, but that story and that narrative and that old mental loop is unhelpful. And so that's something that listeners can also take into account too, is we are no means saying gaslight yourself. We are very much saying press into and listen to what your body is saying, because our body is always talking. So as we wrap up, Dawn, is there anything else that you would like to mention or say about the many kind of topics that we wove in and out?
Oh, yes, they might seem like different topics. That they are, of course, all interconnected. And the last point you made is super important. The fact that we are telling ourselves a story about our lives, and um, do we want to continue that story? You know, do we want to continue that? Oh, this always happens to me. Well, um, you know, and this is again saying, well, is where does that story exist? You know, and the stories are beliefs and ideas. You say, well, it's an idea, it's a thought, because it has always happened. Well, okay, do we want to? Would you like to change the story? You know, say, okay, would you like to change the story? Would you like a different story? What story would you like? Where does that story belong? Where does that story live? Well, it lives in words that are created by our mind. It's and one of the things again with feelings, quite often when people have a feeling, and it might sort of there might be a sensation. They say, "Oh, I'm anxious. I'm nervous. I am," and so they take that as being what they are. They are feeling a feeling and putting a word onto that feeling. So it's again the languaging to say, well, okay, there's a sensation here. To sit with that sensation and say, okay, what is the message here? Instead of putting a label on it, to actually ask what the message is. Because there's quite often that, oh, like butterflies. Oh, I'm feeling scared. Well, that could also mean excited. That feeling. But it's a question of, well, why did I choose scared instead of excited? So again, these are the words. These are stories we're holding on. We just okay. Well, it's a sensation. There's a tingling, or there's a something. There is a something going on.
Yeah.
What is it? Again, keep the curiosity and ask the questions rather than decide what it is. To ask what it is and ask your body and learn and be aware and be on the path of learning and uh, and the excitement of the transformation that can come through from learning and listening to our bodies. So I'm not sure there's anything else that I can think of that to cover that we to tie up what we've covered, because I think it is all intermeshed, really, so interconnected. And that's where, again, with the language, it's the expression, and we can change those words. And I mean, a lot of people say things like, oh, well, the words are used against us, they're spells. Well, yes. And it's a question of whether you want to take that spell on or whether you choose to create your own spells. Okay, let's create our own way of expressing ourselves. And like with Danny Katz, she says, languaging. Instead of language being a noun, she turns it into an action, into a verb. So we're languaging our way through life, which, I think when you look at it, you go, that's a fairly good description, because like you say, with the stories, these are stories. So the stories are based on language. So what language would you like to choose? What story would you like to choose? And it's not just a woo woo, oh well, you can do what you want. It's to recognize that we are different. We are on a journey. We've made certain choices of how we want to experience life, and to be in tune with our body, our mind, and recognize they're all interconnected.
Because of your wordsmithery, you inspired me to change my motto with my company, House Holistics, from it was healthier buildings, healthier people. But after I met you, Dawn, I said, that's not good enough. We want healthy buildings and healthy people, not just healthier. We want to take it to the top, baby. So thank you for
Yes.
inspiring
Oh,
me to really kind of wordsmith my work and how I communicate. And I think there's so many little finite words we use that for me, I didn't even necessarily think about. And I realized that, wait, no, my goal isn't just to design, make, and create like healthier buildings. We want the healthiest on the planet. So thank you, Dawn. Like, I can't thank you enough for inspiring me and really just, I would say, challenging me too. Like, oh yeah, she's right. Like I didn't see it that way. And because I'm obsessed with growth, I receive it all. So I welcome at any point, anytime you hear me communicate, I welcome the feedback to say, hey, Lauren, have you ever thought about saying something differently in this essence? I welcome it. freely.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot. And again, as you say, with healthier than what? Healthier than unhealthy? Yes, yes. I mean, uh, and in the process of, continuing to transform, you may change it again. And I'm just so honored to have been part of your process of helping you language your way into a different energy in in your company wording. So wonderful. Thank you.
Where can listeners find your work? Talk to us about your Substack, your podcast. Tell us it all.
Well, yes, my Substack, I've been writing on Substack for just over 2 years now. Or is it three? No, it's 3 years, I think. Wow, I think 2022. Um, yes, I've been writing articles mainly health based, sort of with that, looking at the kind of narratives that we're being told and exposing the nonsense with them to help people see clearly through what we're told and why it's nonsense. So as I say, I've been writing that. Then I was inspired at Confluence to have a conversation with Asher Cowan that I recorded it and I was going to upload it on my podcast, as an audio file. And then somebody suggested, oh, why don't you do a podcast? And I thought, oh, okay. So I uploaded it as a podcast and then thought, oh, I, yes, okay. I need to have other conversations, which is absolutely fine because I love having conversation. I have had other conversations that I've recorded and done things in the past. And so I've now created a podcast series. I just literally today uploaded the 10th episode. It's called Dawn of Discernment, and discernment is a word that I think we're all, or is a concept that we're all needing to use somewhat more, that so that we don't get trapped in these so we don't get trapped in these prisons of what the different ideas of whether it's within the medical system, the political system, the education system, whatever it is, to be able to discern what's going on, not just attack it and be angry because it's bad, also to be discerning. It was okay, well, what can we do? How can we create something and shift and transform our way, and moving through to other ways of being and other ways of living. So it's dawnlester.substack.com, and Dawn's Writings is the name of the actual Substack, and on there's a separate podcast link, a tab for podcast, and then you can see all my podcast episodes. And the one I've just uploaded today is on homeopathy, which again is fascinating because there's so much more energetic to it. It's not just a straightforward replacement of these pills for other pills. It's a whole different system, which I was originally skeptical about, and I've been learning an awful lot lately, and realizing there's so much more to it. So it's fascinating. So they're the main places. I mean, I'm on Facebook. I tend to just sort of share and post on there and connect with people. I've got an Instagram, although I'm not very active on that. I'm I
And you
I
have a
like
book.
writing.
Yes, you're an excellent writer. Your book, I would encourage
Thank
listeners
you.
to look into. It's What Really Makes You Ill. It's fantastic. And
Thank you.
uh, you bridge this physical and this consciousness piece really well, and I think that's what we are needing as we move forward into this new world we're creating of, yes, there's this reality of things that can make us sick that are toxic, and yes, let's look at our belief systems and let's look at our potentiality of how amazing we really are. we have been lied to about our wonderfulness. And so you really are kind of hailing people this way of like, let's go guys, like we're gonna do both end, and kind of like just opening up all of the magic and possibilities and transformation that we are all seeking. And so in closing, listeners, you can grow beyond resistant patterns. You can become who you are meant to be despite your past. So, Dawn, thank you for helping people step into realizing their full vitality, and I would also say vital life force. So, thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much for inviting me.